My name is Kathleen Lugrich, and I'm the Manager of Programs and Operations for the Army Historical Foundation and your host for Army Artifacts, a program for members that demonstrates Army history can be found everywhere. Today, my guest is Camille Damon, who is a docent at the Pearl Harbor Aviation Museum in Hawaii. Today, Camille and I will be talking about Lieutenants Ken Taylor and George Welch, who were Army pilots present during the December 7th attack on Pearl Harbor in 1941. Camille, thank you so much for speaking with me today.
Hello, I'm glad to be here today.
Would you mind starting off with telling me a little bit about the museum in general, the Pearl Harbor Aviation Museum?
Yeah, so we are a nonprofit museum on the historic Ford Island. We really stand on America's first aviation battlefield of World War II. We really look to share, the artifacts, personal stories, the impact, and really the response to, the attack on December 7th, 1941, and, some of the Pacific region battles that followed after that. And we are a battlefield museum with a focus on aviation during the Pearl Harbor attack and throughout the war on the Pacific. Oh, no.
What are a few key items, like one or two, that people come to see just at your museum?
Well, one of my favorite things that we have here at the museum is our B-17. We call it the Swamp Ghost. It was a plane that it crash landed in the jungle in Papua New Guinea. It sat there for about 60 years in that swamp, and then we were able to get it back here to the museum. So I think it's one of the most amazing pieces we have here. My grandfather was a B-17 pilot, so it's one of my favorites for sure.
Who are Ken Taylor and George Welch?
Ken Taylor and George Welch. These were two newly minted young pilots who really displayed some extraordinary acts of heroism on this day, on December 7th, 1941. And, this story, it really teaches us a great lesson about how to respond under pressure. That's what I kind of got from their story. And so if we kind of just take it back, we set the scene, right? It was early that morning, a beautiful Hawaiian Sunday morning, December 7th. It was about 2.5 weeks before Christmas at the time. And these two young lieutenants, they had been out all night at a Christmas party. They got into an all-night poker game into the early morning. They get back to their barracks at Wheeler Army Airfield. They're still in their tuxedos. And that's when the first wave came over, the first strafing began of Wheeler Army Airfield. And these two pilots, they were already scheduled for a training up in Haleiwa Field. They had their P-40 Tomahawk planes moved up to the Haleiwa Field for that next Monday morning. They were supposed to be up there. So they knew that they already had planes up there. So when the strafing began, they kind of immediately, as they're watching, Wheeler burning, they realized that they have to take some serious action right now. So they get into Welch's brand new Buick and they race up to Haleiwa Field. And, kind of with the theme, it was an incredibly chaotic day. So their drive wasn't anything less than that. It was, they had been strafed several times by the Japanese Zeros as they're racing all the way up to Haleiwa Field. But by the time they get there, because Welch had made a phone call, he said, get the P-40s ready, we're under attack, this isn't a gag. And so they get there, their planes are already ready to go, the propellers are already turning, so they immediately get into their planes and they get up and they make their way to the west side over the Eva mooring mast field. I believe it was a Marine base at the time, and they immediately run into 12 Val dive bombers. So it's kind of like immediately they're already in action. They didn't even have time to hesitate. It was already up in the air. They were already in battle. And Taylor immediately spots one of the bombers heading out to sea. And, he roars after it. He shoots at it. And he kind of watches this Val dive bomber break up before his eyes. So he's credited with that first victory, that first shooting down that first Val dive bomber. And while that's happening, Welch's plane had been hit, and he kind of dove into this protective cloud bank at the time. He sees that, the damages aren't too bad. So he comes out of the cloud bank, and as he's coming out, he actually lands right on the tail of another Val dive bomber. And although now he only had one gun working at the time, he still manages to shoot this Val dive bomber down. So then he's credited with a victory. But at the time, now they're out of ammunition, they're out of fuel. They realize that they need to go back to the burning Wheeler Army Airfield to, to resupply. And so both pilots, they head back. When they get there, they realize that the extra cartridge belts for the P-40s are in one of the burning hangars. So there were two really brave mechanics that ran into this inferno, the burning hangars, to get those cartridges for them, and they end up loading the planes back up. They rearm, they get back up into the sky, and before they even take off, that is when the second wave is coming in. The second strafing of Wheeler Airfield begins, and so they're already shooting before they even take off the ground at this point in time. And Welch and Taylor, they head directly into the enemy planes, and Taylor immediately takes hits as they're taking off at that point. So he's actually nipped in the arm by shrapnel, and Welch sees his plane taking hits, so he kind of whips around to blast the valve that was shooting at Taylor, and so then Taylor has to land, but Welch is credited with shooting down two more planes. So Taylor was credited with 2 victories, and Welch was credited with 4 at the time, which was absolutely incredible. These two men were in their early 20s, and so it was just an amazing feat by the two. And it was kind of very quick that they had to realize that they needed to do something.
No, that's very exciting story. I wish the movie was like that.
I know.
Um, but I do have to ask, you mentioned they were still in their tuxedos. Were they still in
Legend
their
says
tuxedos in the plane?
Legend says they raced up to Haleiwa in their tuxedos, and actually here in the museum we have a P-40 hanging from the ceiling, and if you look very very closely, you can see them wearing their tuxedos. So if anybody gets the chance to come see, it's kind of a little hidden thing we have there, so it's really cool.
That's nice. But I see you also have a few artifacts related to Taylor and Welsh themselves. A flight jacket, is that
Yeah, we
correct?
do. We do, yes. We have Welch's flight jacket on display. We also have a trunk and a bag that are representing what he would have had in the arm with that our army issued, circa 1941 and 42. So those are really amazing. We have that right under the P-40 with their mannequins on the inside. So.
Hey, Camille, what happened to Taylor and Welsh after Pearl Harbor?
So both pilots, after Pearl Harbor, they both received the second highest honor that you can receive in the Army, and that was the Distinguished Service Cross. I do believe Welch earned the Purple Heart as well. And then Ken Taylor, he did continue his military career after the war. He retired from active service as a colonel. He then went on to join the Alaska National Guard, retired as a brigadier general, and then he died in 2006 at 86 years old. So he lived a good life. He did go on to serve for many, many years. So that was absolutely incredible. George Welch went on to become a test pilot for North American Aviation. He was kind of involved with the P-51 Mustangs, and he actually became the first pilot to break the sound barrier in the F-100, which was really, really incredible. Unfortunately, on Columbus Day in 1954, he was pulling out of a 7G dive, and the Super Sabre that he was flying actually disintegrated in the air. And he did survive the crash, but he passed away on the way to the hospital.
Oh, that's so sad.
But it is really
But
it's so wonderful that we can talk about them and that we do have
yeah,
his things on display here and share his story.
yeah, I don't know if there's a lot of people who knew who broke the
Hmm.
sound barrier first, and that it was a former Army pilot.
It was, and
Um,
especially on such a historic day. Not, or I'm sorry, he didn't break the sound barrier on the historic day, but he did do something so incredible after that.
so how can people learn more about Taylor and Welsh?
Well, first thing, come to our museum for sure. You definitely want to come check out our display. We have so many docents that are so passionate here that can tell you so much about this story. And you can also check out our website online. We do have their story online as well. So
Great.
that's something I recommend for everybody if they want to learn more.
So, why would you say the stories of Taylor and Welsh are important to Army history and U.S. history, obviously, in general?
Oh my gosh, so important. Such Such an incredible small piece of history. It's so important. One thing for me is, just that they acted, the fact that they acted. I'm the same age as Welch right now as he was when he did something so incredible. And, I try to think like, would I have done the same? Would I have acted as they did? And it's like they did not hesitate. They really took initiative. They had complete faith in their abilities. They had complete faith in their equipment. They followed their trainings to a T. They didn't sit while the enemy attacked. They did have the willingness to act. So I think even just looking at their actions that day, it shows so much bravery and just how to respond. Like I said in the beginning, how to respond under pressure.
And you mentioned the B-17 earlier in our conversation, but what other Army-related stories or artifacts can you tease our members with?
We do have a really awesome plane here, a Flying Tiger. One thing, of course, first that stands out to you is the way that it is painted. And these were flown by some incredible pilots in the 40s and in the 30s. So this is actually still an active plane as well. So we do have people come in and do maintenance every so often on it. It's a beautiful plane. It has a great story of the American
You guys
volunteer
fly
pilots.
it?
We don't know. We do not fly it, but it can
Oh,
fly. Yeah, some of the
when you
planes here
said
regularly.
active, I got a little excited about
I know
flying tigers.
we had somebody come in the other week, and he said, I'd give anything to see that. I'd give my whole life savings to see that plane in the sky. And yeah, that would be amazing. But no, we do not take it out. But it's
Okay.
just it's amazing that if we ever needed to, we probably could. We also have a B-25 as well, and it's a huge plane. It's so amazing to look at. That plane was involved in the Doolittle raid, a super important kind of like morale booster during this time that happened just a few months after Pearl Harbor. This raid was led by Jimmy Doolittle, who was an amazing pilot as well. And seeing this plane, we actually have, if you look, we have two little signatures from some of the pilots on the plane. So if you look really closely, if you come to the museum, you can spot those two signatures.
Just so many stories, and I really appreciate how you call your museum a battlefield, because
Hmm.
that's what it is.
It
Only
truly
it's
is.
just
And
it's with planes instead
it
of
truly,
people on the ground.
yes. I mean, it is just, we walk on the same grounds that, these people did so many years ago. And so it's just an amazing way to really honor those who defended our freedom. So now we can educate and really inspire those future generations. I think that's, one of the most amazing things that we do here.
Well, thank you so much for sharing all of this information. I need to make it out to Hawaii to see these because I want to see the mannequin in the tuxedo in this plane
Yes.
and learn
Yes.
more about Taylor and Welch.
Yes, absolutely. And we also just recently opened our World War II air control tower. So it's a 207-foot tower. You have a complete 360-degree view of the entire harbor. It truly sets the scene of the day. You really put the pieces together, maybe that weren't there before, because we all learn about Pearl Harbor and the stories, but being able to visualize what happened that day is really incredible. So that's also something I highly recommend if you do ever take the trip out here.
Well, I want to thank Camille for being my guest today. And if you'd like to learn more about the Pearl Harbor Aviation Museum, please visit them online at www.pearlharbораviationmuseum.org. And thank you for watching.